Hello everybody, back again for another one today. Did one earlier, broadcast here, transmission with my friend Waza. We talked a little bit about communications and some of the things going on in the world today, global type level things. And so go back and check the last video I posted earlier this evening. This is September 25th, 2022. So, I muted it that time so I didn't cough or clear my throat into the microphone. So I'm getting better at this. But yeah, so I guess this is sort of a part two of again, one of the other previous videos I did. It was sort of my experience, my ham radio experience that I've gone through over the last decade or so, or well, it's about 2 now. And then based on some of the videos I watch with YouTuber, well, that I watch of a YouTuber called Not a Rubicon, which I've let me bring him up here on YouTube. Really good guy. Not a Rubicon. It's all about his Jeep. His Jeep is not a Rubicon. His wife's is. I think he calls her like she's a Rubicon, and then he's not a Rubicon. But really like his videos. He really gets into GMRS quite a bit. He's not so much a fan of ham radio for reasons that he explains in some of his videos. Just he's maybe lives in an area or has had bad experiences with what he calls sad hams who think they know everything, hams who think that everything they talk about is, you know, the downright truth, and just because they're licensed and so on. And even though GMRS is licensed, you don't take a test, you don't have to study or learn anything. They, you know, a lot of the quote unquote sad hams do their best to make themselves feel superior, and everybody else is not so much. So I don't blame him for that. And there was a video he did, I don't know if it was a couple weeks ago or a couple months ago, where he went out into the field with a ham radio operator, and who's another big guy here on YouTube. I think it's the Ham Radio Crash Course guy. And that guy sort of explained a lot of stuff to him, and he was impressed by it. And even he will admit that, you know, when, you know, the S hits the TF, you know, the SHTF scenarios, hams will be the ones who most likely are going to be communicating the most in the world. GMRS is sort of a close second, because a lot of the newer licensees are starting to get into, you know, they're sort of survivalist type people, you know, just sort of off the grid, setting up their own little GMRS repeaters and so on. If I find that video, I'll have to post it here. But he, like as you see here, me scrolling through, he's really gotten into the GMRS topic, and then mostly doing like radio reviews, but he gets into like, you know, protocol and, you know, different rules and different radios. So he's just good. I mean, he's not huge. He's only about 106,000 subscribers. I think he's gone up a little bit over the past few days, or last week, since I've been watching more of his videos, about 1,000 more people. But then you got the ham radio crash course guy, who's friends of his. He's up to about 262,000 subscribers, 1,387 videos. So he's quite prolific when it comes to posting stuff here. So I probably need to like search for like both of their names and see if I can find the little collab video. There we go. Ham Radio Crash Course, Not a Rubicon. So yeah, there it is. What's the best GMRS radio for hams with not a Rubicon? So they've done some interviews online, and not a Rubicon takes me off roading to a POTA and an SOTA, which is like different competition, something on the air and something on the air. Let me.
Day, Randy from Not a Rubicon Productions takes me to Big Bear, California and shows me what real off-roading looks like in his Jeep, not a Rubicon. I will post Randy's link in the description. Only sad hams don't subscribe to Randy.
Yeah, so it's good to see a collaboration between Randy, not a Rubicon, and the ham radio crash course guy here. I think it's Josh. But to sort of get back to the Woodbridge Wireless, I in part one of this sort of little series that I'm doing here, I talked sort of about some of my early days, some of the things I did, how I had my radio with me on 9/11, and I was able to connect back to the Woodbridge Wireless repeater and sort of let, the immediate people I knew know I was okay and everything. And I think I even relayed a message over to my brother. Because cell phones and pay phones were out. So I think I had somebody on the radio call my brother and let him know I was good, and to call my parents and let them know I was okay. I didn't do a phone patch through the repeater or anything, but I was all the way. I was probably standing at the little mound where the Washington Monument was when I actually was able to get through to the repeater. I think I had the standard HT antenna, and then I had a larger one in my work bag. So I put the larger one on and was able to get through to Woodbridge. So that was sort of my experience there. And then after 9/11, I spent a lot of time up on the roof of my building at work, listening to, or trying to see how far I could get, to different repeaters. I just applied for, like I said, for my GMRS. So it's sort of exciting, and maybe I'll get a little bit more into that here in my local area as well. I think there's a repeater only maybe a quarter mile or half a mile from where I live here in the Somerset Lake Cumberland area, so that's pretty cool. But let me pull up the maps of DC, Washington DC. So I used to work right downtown, right a couple blocks from the White House here, at 13th and F. So the Metro Center here was literally directly beneath my building. I worked in the Columbia Square. Let's get rid of that. Switch over to satellite view. Let's see here. How do I do that? Okay, there's layers. Okay, so there we go. So 13th and F, Metro Center. And it was, things have probably changed a little bit since I was there, but probably not that much. Where is my old building? The Warner Theater was downstairs. I don't think I was up. That's G F Street. Okay, yeah, it was this building. You can see the tables and little areas on the roof where people can sit. And then this is all sort of a patio walking area, and we used to walk between the air conditioners and stuff over to the, around through the, this big grid thing. That's the glass roof. So when you're in the lobby, that's the glass roof. It's 14 stories up. We would walk over to the other. So you could basically walk around the whole roof. These air conditioners, I don't think, used to be there when I was there. So you could walk basically through the center and then back over to the other side. But from the very corner of the building, you could look down and see the top of the White House. So it was just a neat place to work. They got a lot more tables up there now. It's really nice. Too bad I don't work there anymore. I could be having lunch up there every day. But like I said, the Warner Theater was downstairs, next building over. But from that roof, it overlooked, there was like a mall across the way. Not the mall, but a mall. I forget the name of it. And then you had Freedom Plaza here. So I could sort of look off the roof and look over toward the Pentagon, over top of the other buildings. And so I had sort of a clear shot, sort of south or southwest, out of DC. So, another one of the cool experiences I had is, again, I think it was one of my old Yaesu HTs. I got, the big whip antenna on it, and I was able to make a connection one day at lunchtime to a repeater, so like I think it was either 60 or 70 miles south. It wasn't like Fredericksburg. It was somewhere sort of west of Fredericksburg. I want to say off of 66, but I can't remember. But it was a repeater. Then that repeater was linked to the internet, or not only an internet, but also through other just normal RF repeater links. It basically, it was an entire system down through like Western Virginia, then West Virginia, all the way up into like parts of Ohio. And I remember that day there wasn't anybody on there, but I was able to connect to that repeater. And then I was talking to somebody in their mobile driving in like Southern Ohio. And that just blew my mind that I was able to do that. And we were both on RF, but there were, again, repeater links, not only RF, but probably internet links between some of the repeaters. But it was just really amazing to me that even 20 years ago from now that was possible. There were people already setting up link systems like that. So that just, again, absolutely blew me away and really got me into the hobby. And that's when I was still sort of a young ham, and I had been active in Woodbridge Wireless, but I think it was at that point, I think I'd been to the 2001 field day down in Woodbridge. So I had only been to one. I didn't operate a whole lot. I think I maybe operated for about an hour late one night when somebody needed to take a break or go take a nap. And I operated for maybe 2 or 3 hours at like 1 in the morning. And because I lived right around the corner from where we used to do the field days. Well, big corner, but, not far. So I operated a little bit. That got me hooked. I was on shortwave, HF frequencies. I want to say it was maybe 20 meter or 40 meter. I think it was 14 megahertz, so whatever that is, 20. That sounds about right. And let's see what. Yeah, so it wasn't a digital mode. I was using a voice mode, but we had the auto thing, so you could basically hit a button, and there was a recorded voice. Whoever was operating, whoever was boss of that station, it was their voice. CQ DX. This is W4IY, CQ, and so I just hit that button, and then when somebody came back, I think there was a pedal on the ground, and I would like hit the button and it would stop it or start it. So I would stop it, and then when somebody came back to me, and I would do the communication, get their call sign, find out where they are, and then when you're doing a competition, you get like a number, whatever their number is, and whatever the number in your sequence in the log book, in the logging program, because there was a computer in front of me too, so and you would log it. So you made that log, and then those were verified at a later time, and if they matched up, then you got a successful contact, a QSO. So, and then again, between the contact from the roof of the building and then going to that field day and then the 9/11 experience, I was hooked, So I got really, really active at the club, and my previous video I talked about like the crew races, helping out with communications on that, different parades, different events. We did like a jamboree on the air type thing with some Boy Scouts down in Quantico at the Quantico campgrounds. I think there's some pictures of me back in the old days. Yeah, I had that pulled up the other day. It was the old RIDI contest I was involved with KA4RRU Mike. But let me pull up Woodbridge Wireless. Go to the photos. Yeah, the Joda Jamboree on the air. So that was, Dennis, W4DC. I think Dean was there, WA4TK. Mike K4RU, he was there. I guess, I thought there was, maybe it's under the main photos page, not the Joda page. I know there was an old one in there with me in it, because I brought down I was in my Mustang at the time, my GT, and I pulled the radio out of my car, my 706 Mark II G, and okay, so that was events. So if I go under photos here and go back to, maybe it's general photos. That was Field Day 2000. Yeah, I think some of these are out of order, but okay, I talked about this one the other day. August 2002 was when it was the U.S. Rowing National Masters. I was present for that. It was Bob KR4KF, I believe, and then I mentioned the bus. We had our bus set up with a big antenna. We were broadcasting TV from during the whole race or whatever. We had cameras set up there in the race, so it wasn't the best quality at all times, but whenever signals were good, we had it set up, and I think we had a couple big flat screen type, so people could watch it from under the tent. Yeah, there we go, like in athletes' tent and stuff, so they could sort of see what was going on and everything. Well, they weren't flat screens; they're big CRT TVs. But we had this big, on our bus, we had the big antenna, the big Yagi pointing down the race, to pick up, and then that's is that Stu WA0DYJ? Can't remember, but yeah, he had them all. I mean, it's a pretty cool setup. I mean, good times. And I was somewhere on the course. I can't even remember what I worked that day. I might have been sort of a roving, wandering type person, or just sort of wandering between different places to, if somebody needed a break or something, to take over what they were doing. Because I had done many before that, many after as well. So, and the CQ Worldwide RIDI contest. So that's, there's Dennis. I was there that year. There's some of his antennas, and so I thought that was out in Fauquier County near Quantico. These are all my pictures, actually. So I'm probably not in any of them, but this is just that basement I talked about. There's my old car, so N8CIA. And everybody else's, all their license plates. So there's still a handful of pictures that I took. I don't know if I took any at the 2001. Was I present there? Yeah, probably not. 2002. Yeah, I'm sort of just reminiscing here, so bear with me. I didn't go to the Hamvention. I guess there's a big gap here. Let's see. Let me go to this one, because I think this is actually 2001 or 2, but it's not labeled properly. Yeah, it's 2003 Field Day. So, different awards, different setups. We had like satellite, And we had these, which are we called them rocket launchers. They were basically like a tower, like tubular tower, and you would set up the base, and there were all these, and down on the bottom left hand, you'll see all these other tubes. So you basically connect them all with like a bracket or like a brace, and then each section you just keep, turning it, and it keeps going up, and then every once in a while you put in a little guy wire thing, and then, just to keep it stable. And I think I have some pictures of it put fully up, and you can see the guy wires coming off of them. So we put up the big beams on those. Here's a guy. So yeah, as it's starting to go up, and then we had some old, like Roan 45 or whatever, the old style tower. Had tents. Yeah, there's the rocket launcher. So it's a bunch of tubes, and they're old, like army towers, like surplus. Then we had the computer, then all the equipment, the radio, and the automatic key calling thing, and an amplifier usually of some kind. So, yeah. Man, I remember a lot of these guys. I can't remember all their call signs, but I remember every single one of them. I mean, it was just such a good experience. Rainy before that, so it was still a bit wet out. So yeah, he's like putting on the rotor, tightening up the rotor there, which turns the antenna, with a little rotor box. And then that's when it was sort of fully up. Yeah, so it got up there pretty good. Yeah, it looks like about 40 feet, 50 feet. And as long as you had guy wires, you could probably combine two of them into one and get it even further. So there was probably 6 or 7 of those rocket launcher devices, and then this looks like the older style tower. It sort of looks like one of the ones that are inside of each other, and it gets smaller as it goes up. So I don't remember that tower specifically, but here's Dennis W4DC. I think it's W4RM. We had the trailer. I mean, it was just a hardcore club, That's one of the younger kids. I think it might have been Dennis's son or something. It's W4DC there on the left. Still in touch with him. Just talked to him a couple weeks ago, or maybe 2 weeks ago on the phone. It was good to catch up. He's living down in Florida now. And then, there's a lot of hanging around time too, even though there was people operating every station, we were always around. So that was cool. So I'll have to go through some of the pages. I know there's some with me in them. I mean, I know it's sort of like I was behind the camera for a lot of them because I was sort of like the photographer type guy back then. That's sort of what I did. I guess I could go through and look at other people's, and I'll probably find some of me. Let's try that. What a concept. Yeah, gosh. Some of these fellows are probably SK now, silent key. I think that's Barry. Who was that? W4MGM? I couldn't remember the call sign the other day. Maybe Barry. Mike. W3KX. Don't remember him too much. I know I'm in here somewhere. I think these are all from the same year, so I gotta be it. So I'm going to keep going until I find me. And then we had some public officials out, like a police captain, or I think it might have been Woodbridge or Prince William County Sheriff. I think that was the county guy. I didn't label. I don't have labels on all these, I don't think. And so they came out to sort of. There's Jack at the background there. On the right-hand side, Jack WD4KOF. think he passed in 2014, maybe. I'm going to keep going until I find one of me in here. I know I was there. Yeah, there's some kiddos, twins, I think. It's one of our luncheons, Friday luncheons. Maybe the one right before the field day started. It was a weekend event. I'm not on those. K4JK. I think I've been wiped. I thought I had some in here, but obviously that's my name, so I did take those myself. KQ4KK. Some of the younger folks, I remember that was an APRS sort of demo with a laptop and at the time some more advanced equipment. And so APRS is like a automatic position reporting. So through the radio would sort of transmit on a certain frequency, amateur position reporting system. So the radio would again transmit GPS coordinates. I'm not sure if that time if you had to have an external GPS connected to your radio or through the system through a laptop or whatever. But nowadays radios have like built-in APRS, so the GPS chip is in the radio already, and like every 30 seconds or whatever time frame you set it to, it'll automatically transmit your coordinates to everybody on that frequency, and anybody within range can see where you're at. So it's probably most useful in like urban and rural search and rescue, where there's a large group of people, and you know somebody back at the base needs to sort of keep an eye on where everybody is, where they're searching, making sure they're not going out of bounds or anything like that. But I never did make it to a mountaintop. That's one of the events I wish I would have made it to. Let's see. So yeah, I think most of the pictures I took. Again, I put out a call on the our mailing list, or our we call it a reflector, like our group message for Woodbridge. I put out a call for pictures from those days, from the crew races or any other event. I'm just, I just sort of like to find one that has me in it, just for my own, just to show the kids, my kids, what I was involved in back when I was, in my early 20s or early to mid 20s. Because I tell them all these stories, but just to be able to show them pictures and so on would be sort of cool. Sort of go down through here a little bit. Maybe I'll find one that, or maybe it was a radio merit badge. It wasn't the JOTA. There I am. Okay, so it wasn't the JOTA, the Jamboree on the Air, even though I was at that. Here, that's me on the right. When I still had hair. So that's me. I can't forget the guy next to me, then Dean, I think WA4TK, Dennis, W4DC. We all had our jackets on. I still have it somewhere. It's probably in my storage unit or something. So that's the day we went out to Quantico and we set up everything and basically just taught the scouts. We basically taught different portions to help them earn their merit badges. Like I said, I took my radio out of the car, so that's me with my radio, my 706, with one of the scouts getting them on the air and everything. And they loved it. I mean, it was just, again, just fun stuff. And that's how I got started, back. So I got to pay it forward, I guess, in a way, because the Radio Merit Badge and the JOTA, they're typically combined events because it's Jamboree on the Air, and typically they're teaching the Merit Badge, or you have a Merit Badge counselor there who's a ham, or to teach what needs to be taught to allow the scout to past that section, and so on. So it's very sort of programmatic. You just go through sort of step by step, because I think one of them is like get on the radio, try to make contact. I don't think you have to make a contact, of course, because it can be hard depending on the weather, the propagation, sunspot cycles, so on and so forth, without getting into technical stuff. But so at least if they try, if they get one, better, because that might spark it in them. I mean, I'm hoping at least one or two of those kids went on to get their ham radio license or got into communications or something. So, but as I said in my previous video, when I was in the position of those kids, it was an overnight thing, and so I was on the radio all night long, like calling for people, and typically with depending on what band you're on, what frequency range you're on, sometimes some of them are better during the day, some of them are better at night, and it's just unless you're an experienced ham and I was just calling. I was just going around from radio to radio, like calling CQDX, whatever, and until I got somebody, and I got a few, but the coolest thing that night, I was still young. I didn't live at the Boy Scout camp that I was at yet. I ended up living there later. My dad became like the caretaker of the property, much later after the jamboree on the air. But I remember I think it was the first night of the event, the Mir space station, which is the old Russian space station. Back then, I don't know how they figured out when it was coming over. I guess, there was probably maybe a magazine or maybe an early BBS system or something that let you know when it was going to be passing, but they knew it was coming over. And I remember them calling out to the Mir space station, and just like the International Space Station now.
Weird sound. It's the sound of the space station, right? If you point your camera up above the trees,
pretty much all astronauts are ham radio operators, and there are ham radios that operate on the space station. And on their off time, they can get on those and just talk to people if they just want to try to make contact with somebody on Earth, or sometimes they're set up like where schools talk to the International Space Station. That's typically done through ham radio. But I remember that night so long ago when the guy went outside. He had like what's called a Yagi antenna, which is a really like long directional antenna with all these little elements going up, and he sort of pointed it up at the sky at the right time and you could see it. It was a clear night. You could see a little dot sort of pop over the horizon, and that was the space station.
Weird sound. It's the sound of the space station, right? If you point your camera up above the trees,
So he would point the antenna and sort of follow it, and he was calling out at the same time, with his other hand, and the station came back. It came back in like broken English. I forget the call sign of the club that was operating, but he confirmed the contact, but it only lasted like 5 minutes because it was sort of lower on the horizon. It wasn't directly over. If it's directly over, it can last like 7 or 8 minutes, but if it's lower on the horizon, it only lasts maybe 4 or 5. So we took a couple calls to him, but like I said, in broken Russian, they responded and contact was made. So, yeah. So after that's what sort of sparked my initial interest to even get a ham license. And I think I told a little bit of this in part 1, but my dad started taking me to the classes down at Middletown Public Library in Middletown, Ohio, and he didn't have any serious interest in it. I mean, I think maybe some of his relatives or people he knew back in his hometown when he was a kid were into it. I mean, my dad sparked my interest in radio in the first place. With like a little crystal radio set, like from Radio Shack. It didn't even have a battery. It just worked from a crystal. It still eludes me. I think the crystal was so sensitive and that it would literally pick up the airwaves directly out of the air. The radio waves coming into whatever antenna, and you had to tune it pretty carefully. Just the radio waves would oscillate the crystal. I'm trying to get it right here. I'm not looking it up. I'm trying to remember. But I think just the radio waves themselves coming into your antenna, which was like wrapped around like a crystal, it would oscillate. And then with a very, very low power earpiece, it wasn't even a headset. It was just like a single little earpiece, like super low power one. You could hear what was coming in on whatever frequency that crystal was tuned to. But I did pick up some things. And typically, again, it was sort of, the whole thing was sort of made for kids. And, you're not going to go out and buy like a huge antenna. So I remember sort of wrapping the antenna sort of around like a water pipe, like a copper water pipe in the basement. And I just remember sitting down there like the corner near a pipe, just trying to get anything to come through. And I did hear some stuff. None of it was super intelligible. It might have been foreign language or broadcasts or something like that. But that goes back to before I was even 10. So that was probably like 7, 8, 9 years old. After I started computer programming, then I sort of got out of that for a bit, and I sort of got into radio for a while. So radio, Boy Scouts, stuff like that, Cub Scouts, and the Weeblos, and then eventually into Boy Scouts. This is going a little long. I don't know. I'm trying to fill in some of the gaps from part 1 without repeating too much from it. So, like I said, my dad took me to the ham radio classes in Middletown, and I took the novice test, and that's before you could. That was back when you had to pass a novice just to basically have the lowest level, and you barely had any privileges or frequencies to talk on at all. You couldn't even talk on the popular 2 meter 440 frequencies that most hams use. You couldn't do that. For that, and then a little bit later, after the novice, is when the Tech Plus license came out. And so I took my novice and I failed it. I missed it by like 1 or 2 questions. And that disenfranchised me a bit. But my dad, a little bit later, went back and took his, and he got what was the new, at the time, the new Tech Plus, which is where most hams, they eliminated novice, so Tech Plus is sort of where you get in now. That's the entry level. And when I took the novice, you had, for the Tech, not the Plus, but for the Tech, you had to have like 5 word a minute Morse code. And so even if I passed the novice, then I would have to take a harder test, but also do. I don't think you had to transmit. I think you just had to receive and decode 5 word a minute Morse code, which I would have figured out. And I'm pretty good at basic Morse code now. Like, I can call like CQ, CQ. I don't know if I can do DX or not. I forget X, but I can say like CQ from, and then my call sign, like dot it, dit da, dot it, dit da, and then that's CQ, and then what is it? Oh shoot, I forget D. And then E is like dit. Then my call signs da 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 da, yeah, da 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 da. That's probably totally wrong, so excuse me. But let's see, after that, I think I got into a little bit. I got into CB for a while just because it was easy. Once we moved into that Boy Scout camp a couple years later, by that time, the radio was still going. I remember probably the first radio I ever bought was a Pioneer, an old Pioneer base station. I can't even remember the model number, but I worked on a fruit farm for like minimum wage, and back then that was like not a whole lot. It was like $3 an hour. I was in high school and working with my friend Matt, and we went out to that fruit farm a handful of times, and I saved up just barely enough money. I think we worked there in the summer a little bit, like clearing stuff, and then we went back in the winter and to put hay around strawberries to keep them from, totally freezing. Those sort of like hay to insulate the strawberry roots. And I remember freezing my ass off that winter, but I saved up enough money finally to buy like the base station I wanted. It was like a 40 channel Pioneer Radio Shack. It was whatever the Radio Shack brand was. Well, Pioneer, but it was one that they sold. There was like one major base station. So they had all the handhelds, the walkie-talkies, but I wanted this base station. And I couldn't even afford an antenna for it that time. So I think for a little while, I had like a loose piece of coax cable. And I just put that in and touched other stuff. I knew I was smart enough to know I couldn't transmit on it or I would damage the radio, but I was able to listen and sort of hear locals, the people who were in my community. But then I moved from Lebanon, Ohio to like Carlisle, Franklin, Ohio. And when I moved into the Boy Scout camp, I think I mentioned this a little bit in the previous one, but there was already an antenna on the house. I didn't know what frequency band it was for. At first, I thought it might have been for the old business band radios that I used to use when I worked on staff at the Boy Scout camp, which were 154.6 and like 625. It was the old, the MURS, the MURS frequencies. Limited to 2 watts. They were old Motorola radios. So I thought it might have been the antenna for that, but so I took the chance. When we moved in, it was probably like maybe 2 or 3 nights after we moved in, I found the coax because it was run through the walls. I found out where it was coming in at, and the end of the coax was cut off, but I literally I knew enough to know that the center part of the coax went into the center part of the SO239 connector, and then the shielding was meant to touch the outside where it's screwed on, where you screw on the connection. So I literally just held it on by hand, and the radio just lit up. I was hearing like people talking from all over the place. It was just after sunset, it was the right time, the right conditions, with the sun, just going down. So it was like very loud. I mean, I tuned around. I went to like channel 19, with one hand. I'm sitting here holding the coax on, and I finally heard somebody that was like loud and clear and like super loud. I forget what, I think it was channel 23 in Franklin. That was the popular channel. 19 is, of course, the truck drivers. But then, like, every local area sort of had their own channel, and 23 was the local channel in Carlisle, Franklin, Middletown, sort of North Middletown, and Germantown, and Miamisburg, around those areas. So I waited until somebody paused, and I'm just like, break, breaker, and they said, go ahead, break, and I'm like, yeah, you can hear me? I was just excited. They're like, oh, yeah, we can hear you just fine, loud and clear. And because the Boy Scout camp was sort of on top of the hill overlooking all of Carlisle, Franklin, Middletown to the south. Germantown, it was sort of over a hill, so I didn't talk to too many people on that side. But they're like, yeah, we can hear you loud and clear, and 9 over 5 or 5 over 9, whatever they said, 5 by 5. So I talked to them, and they're like, what's your handle, what's your name, your nickname or whatever, and I'm like, I had to think for a second, and back when I was when I was working on staff at that camp, somebody at one time called me like Iceman from the 1995 Top Gun or whatever. Or whenever Top Gun came out. Was it 85? I don't know. Whenever that first came out, somebody called me Iceman, so I'm like, this is Iceman, here in Carlisle, just outside of Carlisle, and they're like, well, good, good to talk to you and everything, and they went back to their conversation, and just like with Ham later on in my life, at that time, that hooked me. I was CB, so I found the right connector, and I spliced it and made sure everything was good, and basically put a new connector on the antenna on the roof. I knew it was tuned. I didn't have it like a meter. I couldn't, I could barely afford the radio, so I couldn't afford what's called an SWR meter to see if it was tuned properly, but it seemed to be working. The radio didn't get too hot and stuff. So again, it worked. So I basically became sort of a local in Carlisle, Franklin, Middletown area. I'm trying to remember some of the handles of the people I used to talk to there, the names. It was like Sis. She lived up on, like I said, I was on a hill, but right on top of the hill that I lived on. I mean, I don't care if to say these places anymore because I haven't been there in 20 plus years, but it was Camp Hook Boy Scout Camp in northwestern Warren County. Warren County is like a square, but up at the very corner there's a little piece that pops out, and a big part of that little piece that pops out was the Boy Scout camp. But just behind, just sort of north or northwest, I guess it was sort of northwest of the Boy Scout camp, was another hill that went even higher up, and there was a big broadcast antenna up there. But that's where Sis lived. She is an older lady. Older now. I mean, she was probably only in her 40s at the time. I'm probably older than she was when I was talking to her, but I was only a teenager. I was only like 14, 15, and so we became sort of fast friends, and she was always on. She lived close, and when the conditions sort of quieted down and we couldn't get out that far, she was close enough I could talk to her at any time. So, we just chit-chatted, just about anything, whatever. I mean, she'd ask like how my homework went, if I had any questions. She was almost sort of like a mom to me. But so I talked to her a lot. Then there was another guy down in Franklin, Lone Wolf. He worked at the Warren County Correctional Center. So he worked a lot, and I talked to him sort of going back and forth to work. But I ended up meeting up with a lot of these people. We had sort of picnics or whatever. We'd meet up and hang out and stuff. It was sort of like Ham. I mean, it was even though that wasn't common in CB, like everywhere, the people who were in this group, they were cool about meeting up and hanging out and so on. I mean, of course, everybody gossiped, and there was gossip, and that was adult stuff for me. I didn't care. I was just sort of happy to meet everybody I was talking to. So, but Lone Wolf was one. There was another guy. He was probably sort of the most pivotal to me. I can't remember his handle. Remember his name. It was Jeff something. Jeff. It'll come back to me. But when I got to the point where I was starting to make some money, I was working I worked at McDonald's a little bit, KFC. I started to make a little bit of money, and I wanted to improve my system. So I was able to buy like a better antenna, but I needed help like setting it up or getting it higher up on a tower above the house. And I think at one point I had my antenna like 60 feet over the house, like connected using like underground metal piping that we had laying around at the Boy Scout camp. But this Jeff Hammond, I can't remember his handle on CB, but he, Jeff Hammond, I wonder where he is today. He was probably in his late 20s, early 30s. But again, that was 20 years ago. He's probably 60-something now, probably retired. He was an electrical worker. I remember he was like a member of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. But he he helped me set up my tower, and he built like a brace onto the roof, so when we got the tower leaned up at a straight angle, we put a bracket around it and held the base of it, above our head, like, at the it was probably about 10-foot level. But the tower went much higher, and we put some like guy wires off into the woods to sort of keep the wind from blowing it around. And even though the pipe was pretty stiff, when you get like I think like the antenna I was able to buy, I think it was like 13 feet, or I can't remember the exact length of it, but or even it was an Antron. I think it was an Antron 99, which was a popular omnidirectional, which is all the way around, and it just transmits out at 360 degrees. Antron 99 antenna had a little ground plane coming off of it, but it got that up pretty high. I mean, and probably the first contacts I made like overseas were using that setup, and I had many radios too. That original base station, I think I either messed it up or something, but I had many others over that time. There was an old T-Berry base station that I had. Don't remember. I think that was only 23 channels. But thankfully it went up to 23 because that was my local channel, was at 20. Because CB started like at 23, and then they extended it up to 40 channels later on. Then there was trying to remember. I'm digging so deep into my memory banks here to remember all this. There was a radio. It was a ham radio, a 10 meter. CB's 11 meter when it comes to like the frequency band that it's on. So you could take like a 10 meter ham radio, and if you modified it right, this is probably illegal or whatever. I didn't know that. I was like a kid, but with one of my jobs, I finally saved up enough money. I think it was only $295. So I sort of laugh about it now, but it was I remember the model. I think it was an HR 2510. I can't remember the brand. But it was a HR 2510 radio. So it was a 10 meter. I think it was like 50 watts, which again, that's illegal because you're only supposed to transmit it at 4 watts. But again, I didn't know, and I probably should have known. But there was really no internet back then. I wasn't on the internet yet, and websites. I mean, the FCC probably didn't even have a proper website at that time, and I didn't bother to look at it. I just got any radio I could and hooked it up and tuned it. But that radio, instead of having channels like 1 through 40, you just put in the frequency. So CB radio 11 meter starts at 26.965 megahertz, and it goes up to 27.405, which is 4 more channels, but it skips a little bit between some of them, including 23. Well, when they extended the band, 23 is a little jumbled up, so it goes like, technically it goes like 20, 21, 23, 22, 24. So, usually you could tell, like channel 19 was 27.185 megahertz. So below that, I sort of knew like 185 was 19. 175 was 18. 165 was 17, and it mixed up around 14, 15. But I sort of knew where the channels were by frequency. I didn't know how to program like the memories in, so I never bothered to do that. But I think channel 23 was 27 point, I think it was 223. And just, again, did that for a while. And then eventually, life happened. I got out of high school. I had to start thinking about jobs. I was dating my ex-wife at the time. I just sort of dropped out of the radio scene. I sort of remembered sort of phasing myself out. I sort of said some goodbyes to people I'm probably not going to be around for a while. It's sort of sad. It was no fanfare. There was no nothing. I didn't and every once in a while when I, happened to dig out one of my radios or one of my old handhelds or something, I would pop back on there now and then and talk to that sis lady or lone wolf or any number of the other locals. There was a girl that just went by the name Baby. Got a few of my other friends that I was from school and stuff into it, and they got on CB, and we talked between us, and then they got to know some of those people as well. But that was sort of my CB experience. So that filled in a lot. I pretty much covered most of that. I mean, there's a little bit more to it, but I mean, that's the bulk of it. It was just, the Boy Scout camp, setting up antennas. Yeah, well, one other little story I'll go ahead and tell. I'm almost an hour into this, but I remember when I started talking like farther and farther, I wanted to get higher and higher up in the air, and I couldn't put up that big of an. My antenna was probably 30 feet. It wasn't 60, like I said earlier. It was probably 30 feet. And the trees around the house were higher than that, so my signal wasn't probably even propagating out as well as it could have. But I remember one time I took one of my mobile. I had multiple radios, but I took one of my mobiles, and with a tractor battery, it was like a deep cycle, like big tractor battery. And I at the Boy Scout camp we had a water tower, one of the golf ball shaped ones. So it was our own water tower. So I found the key to it, and I took a tractor battery, put the radio on top with a microphone, and I climbed up that water tower with this radio in my arms. So it was basically one hand on the ladder and my 2 feet, and I'm just, next thing, foot, next thing, next rung, foot, while carrying this. I mean, I was a skinny kid. I was probably only like 125 pounds, but I'm carrying like this 50-pound tractor battery with a radio and a mic on top and all the wires and everything else up this ladder. And the tower had like, I think it was 2 or 3 sections. So from the base of it to the first, the golf ball, it's sort of like shaped like this at the bottom. And then there's like a platform at the first level. And then you got the center tube going up. So you climb up to that. And then there's another little platform. And that's where I set the system up. There was like a little area to sit, or, so I put everything up there. And I had enough coax on it. I had a mag mount antenna. I got that separately and brought it back up. But I went and stuck that on top of the water tower. I lifted the lid open, put the antenna on the back, and closed it. The coax was, hanging down to my radio, screwed it in, hooked it to the battery. And my goodness, I mean, I was pretty much above the trees at that point, even though it was a mobile antenna. I mean, people were coming in. I was hearing, again, other countries and stuff. I mean, it was crazy. So I made a lot of contacts. And I remember, a popular thing back in those days, especially with truck drivers on Channel 19, were the echo mics. Echo, 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 echo. And I remember somebody asked me, like, what kind of echo mic is that? Your echo sounds really good. And I'm like, it's a water tower. It's a 60-foot water tower. and I had to explain it, to them that I'm literally sitting in the, midsection of a water tower. And they just laughed. I think it was somebody that I knew, like Lone Wolf or one of the other guys in town. So, they knew where I lived and they knew what I was doing. So, but yeah, so that's sort of a fun story. Not so fun as the first time I tried to go up that ladder with the battery and everything. I actually fell from right below that second level where I put the radio. I fell all the way down to that center section, or the first level section, and it's probably like 15, 20 feet. I think I sort of like put my arms up and slowed myself, but the everything sort of came down on top of me, the radio and stuff. I'm surprised I walked away from that without any serious damage, but Yeah, it's getting long, so I might end up doing a part 3. I covered a lot of the ham, but there's still other little stories at some point that I'll think of after I'm off the broadcast, that I'll make note of and talk about. But mostly tonight was my early radio, the early ham stuff. Some of the stuff like on the screen here where where I taught kids because people taught me, so sort of a next generation. And I was always sort of the youngest person in the club, so I sort of could relate better with the kids and some of the older guys. And I think in that picture there, I'm probably 25, I guess. So and the average sort of age of the club members were anywhere from even the youngest ones after me were like late 30s, and then it went on up from there. So it was sort of, I was glad to be around because I learned a lot from them. The older hams, they call them Elmers. They sort of teach you. They're sort of passing on the trade, passing on the craft. So yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and jump off here for tonight. Have some meetings tomorrow. It's only about 11:30, but I got to be up at about 10:30 in the morning for a meeting. So everybody have a good week, good night, good day, wherever you are, and peace out.